Welcome to reading class today, everyone. We're going to head to page 97, or if you've got the white book, page 122, as we look up our first vocab word from chapter 14. The word is hueless, and you can find it in the last sentence of the first paragraph. It says this. I'm going up a few lines. The bright orange of pumpkins being trucked from the agricultural fields beyond the community boundary. Seen in an instant, the flash of brilliant color, but gone again, returning to their flat, hueless shade. This is Jonas trying to see colors more and more and more, right? And he could, if he really concentrated, make colors appear for a while, but then they'd go back to their hueless shade. The word hue just means color or shade. So hueless literally means colorless. Okay? So that's one that means no colors at all. So hueless you can think of as a synonym for colorless. Let's go to sinuous, page 100 or 126. If you've got the white book, come join me. Please be faithful in continuing to look these words up with me. That makes you a better reader. It makes you better at your vocabulary words when you see them in context. 3 paragraphs from the bottom, starting with now he saw another elephant. Here we go. Now he saw another elephant emerge from the place where it had stood hidden in the trees. Very slowly it walked to the mutilated body and looked down. With its sinuous trunk it stroked the huge corpse. Then it reached up, broke some leafy branches with a snap, and draped them over the mass of torn, thick flesh. So this was the little elephant funeral we saw in one of his memories that was passed on to him, right? And this word sinuous was used to describe an elephant's trunk. So that gives you kind of a little bit of a clue as to what sinuous means. Sinuous literally means curvy. So you can picture an elephant's trunk and how it curves in all different directions, right? And so it makes sense that that would be a good word to describe this elephant's trunk. A sinuous trunk, curvy. Almost like the branch of a tree or a vine, curvy. 108 for our last one. 136 if you're in the white book. Invigorating. Third paragraph, I'm going to read the whole thing. It's very short. Third paragraph of chapter 14. It says, the sled moved forward, and Jonas grinned with delight, looking forward to the breathtaking slide down through the invigorating air. Invigorating. You know, maybe you step outside on a beautiful day and there's a nice breeze. It feels invigorating. Or after playing basketball, you chug a Gatorade and that feels invigorating, you could say. Invigorating means it gives you energy. Something that gives you energy or makes you awake. So here he is at the top of a hill, and his heart is probably beating quickly because he's anticipating it's going to be exciting. I get to slide down this hill, right? And he's getting invigorated by it. You know, you play a sport or you do snowboarding or you do another activity that you love. It feels invigorating. It gives you energy. You like to do it, right? And to Jonas, sledding was that for him, at least at first. All right, let's talk about what happened in chapter 14. It says, what were 2 major differences about this new sled memory and from his old one? Well, number 1, the snow was icy this time, right? The runners couldn't really get their grip on it, and so he was slipping and sliding all over the place, right? And then number 2, the worst part, he broke his leg, right? This was a bad memory of sledding, and so that was extreme pain that he had to go through, right? What did Jonas later realize then that day that his parents had never experienced? How did this make him feel, and why? So later on, he realized that his parents have really never felt true pain. Right? And that really made him feel lonely. Does that make sense? Why? When you're going through something and it doesn't seem like anybody understands, that's a really lonely feeling, right? And so for Jonas, this was lonely. He didn't have anyone he could talk to about this really severe and awful pain. In his community, they had all these drugs and shots that they could immediately give people, so people never really suffered terrible, terrible pain. So he felt really lonely about it. Why did the giver say that he had to hold all the horrible memories? Well, that was their job, right? He said that they would do it so that the community wouldn't have to deal with these. So that was his and Jonas's job, is to hold on to these memories that were important but painful so that nobody else had to worry about them. That was their service to the community, right? Discuss one of the times where the giver had to give advice using his memories. Tell why his memories were important and what kind of advice he gave. So there's a couple examples he gave of this. Number 1, when the community wanted to allow more children, a bigger population, right? And the giver had new memories of starvation and how if you have too many people, you can't feed them all if there's not enough food. And so he advised them that it would not be a good idea to let families have more than 2 kids. There was that other one where the plane flew over, right? And the people in the community wanted to shoot down that plane. But the giver had memories of war and how if you shoot somebody down, that could start a war and end up in your own destruction, right? So he gave the advice in that situation not to shoot at the plane. Just wait and see what happens. What made Jonas angry about the job of the receiver? What did he want to do? He thought it was unfair that he and the giver had to carry this whole burden of all these bad memories themselves. He thought that we should spread them out among the whole community and all deal with it with one another. And he just was very bitter about that for a little while, right? And that makes sense that this is a really tough thing he's being asked to do. What was Jonas's dad afraid might happen to Gabriel, and why? Gabriel still wasn't sleeping well at night, right? Still was causing fusses and waking the family up, and so the dad was worried that Gabriel was going to have to be released, because babies aren't allowed to do that in this community, right? What would Jonas's dad have to do since some twins were expected to be born? So there was this birth mom who was giving birth to twins, identical twins, and in this community there's only allowed to be one person that looks like you, right? They want everybody to be an individual, and so they were going to release one of them. That's kind of a crazy, sad thing, right? And then number 8, what did Jonas volunteer to do for his dad? How did Jonas do this job in a special way with his receiver training? He volunteered to take Gabriel into his room. And then when Gabriel cried, he actually kind of did it on accident at first and then on purpose the second time, right? He gave a memory of sailing on a calm sea to the baby with the sun and the beautiful sunshine and calmness and rocking of the waves, right? And that actually calmed Gabriel down. It worked. What did Jonas decide he wouldn't tell the giver at the end of the chapter? He wasn't going to tell the giver he gave away one of his memories. He wasn't sure how the giver would react to that, and that makes sense, right? I'm sure he was wondering if the giver would be upset with him for that. So, we talked yesterday about reading with expression. Hopefully I did that pretty well for you. I'm going to do that again today, and I'm just going to keep reminding you of this from time to time, because remember, eventually an assignment is coming where you're going to choose a part of this book and you're going to record yourself reading it with good expression. So just a few reminders of how to do that. Remember to change your pitch for different voices of characters, right? When you're asking a question, make your voice go up, right? Because you're questioning something. Change your pitch to do all those different things, right? Change your rhythm. Pause after every sentence, right? After every comma. A little bit shorter of a pause, but you still want to pause, right? You want to speak faster if it's an exciting part. Oh no, what's going to happen, right? You speed up a little bit to create that tension, or slow down if there's a nice calm ocean or rocking waves, right? Changing your volume if someone's really angry, talking loudly, or someone's whispering, say it softly, right? That to create emphasis. And then change your tone. You can say things in different ways. An angry person sounds a lot different than a very calm person, or a sad person sounds a lot of it different than a happy person, right? And you can make those feelings and emotions come out with your voice. Remember, it's not only good to do that to make your reading entertaining for yourself in your head or for other people. Someday when you read to your kids, they like when you do that, right? But also it helps you understand the story better, because you start feeling what the characters are feeling and understand a little bit better their feelings and emotions and what they're trying to say. So I'll try to do that again well for you today as we listen to chapter 15 today is what we're going to read together. I'm going to read this with as much emphasis as I can. Then my challenge to you is, even if you just read it quietly in your head, can you read chapter 16 with emphasis today as part of your assignment? So here we go. 118 if you're in the Black Book. Jonas entered the annex room and realized immediately that it was a day when he would be sent away. The giver was rigid in his chair, his face in his hands. "I'll come back tomorrow, sir," he said quickly. Then he hesitated. "Unless maybe there's something I can do to help." The giver looked up at him, his face contorted with suffering. "Please," he gasped, "take some of the pain." Jonas helped him to his chair at the side of the bed. Then he quickly removed his tunic and lay face down. "Put your hands on me," he directed, aware that in such anguish the giver might need reminding. The hands came, and the pain came with them and through them. Jonas braced himself and entered the memory which was torturing the giver. He was in a confused, noisy, foul-smelling place. It was daylight, early morning, and the air was thick with smoke that hung, yellow and brown, above the ground. Around him everywhere, far across the expanse of what seemed to be a field, lay groaning men. A wild-eyed horse, its bridle torn and dangling, trotted frantically through the mounds of men, tossing its head, whinnying in panic. It stumbled, finally, then fell, and did not rise. Top of 119. Jonas heard a voice next to him. "Water!" the voice said in a pitched, croaking whisper. He turned his head toward the voice and looked into the half-closed eyes of a boy who seemed to be not much older than himself. Dirt streaked down the boy's face and his matted blonde hair. He lay sprawled with his gray uniform glistening with wet, fresh blood. The colors of the carnage were grotesquely bright. The crimson wetness on the rough and dusty fabric, the ripped shreds of grass startlingly green in the boy's yellow hair. The boy stared at him. "Water!" he begged again. When he spoke, a new spurt of blood drenched the coarse cloth across his chest and sleeve. One of Jonas's arms was immobilized with pain, and he could see through his own torn sleeve something that looked like ragged flesh and splintery bone. He tried his remaining arm and felt it move. Slowly he reached to his side, felt the metal container there, and removed its cap, stopping the small motion of his hand now and then to wait for the surging pain to ease. Finally, when the container was open, he extended his arm slowly across the blood-soaked earth, inch by inch, and held it to the lips of the boy. Water trickled into the imploring mouth and down the grimy chin. Notice this is a war scene, right? He's been getting a war memory. The boy sighed. His head fell back, his lower jaw dropping as if he had been surprised by something. A dull blankness slid across his eyes. He was silent. In other words, he died, right? But the noise continued all around, the cries of wounded men, the cries begging for water and for mother and for death. Horses lying on the ground shrieking, raised their heads and stabbed randomly toward the sky with their hooves. Top of page 120. From the distance, Jonas could hear the thud of cannons. Overwhelmed by pain, he lay there in the fearsome stench for hours, listened to the men and animals die, and learned what warfare meant. Finally, when he knew he could bear it no longer and would welcome death himself, he opened his eyes and was once again on the bed. The giver looked away as if he could not bear to see what he had done to Jonas. "Forgive me," he said. So that's the end of chapter 15. Our code word, by the way, for today is war, as that matches what we read about in our topic here. So thank you for continuing to be faithful and listening to our videos. One of the reasons I hide code words in our videos, and I know I've been forgetting and doing them at the end lately. I apologize for that. I'll try to squeeze them in different places, but just to always check that we're being faithful and listening to these videos. Even if you read ahead, good for you to read with us because we stop and chat about things every now and then and such, right? And it's always, I've read this book probably 5 or 6 times already in my life, and it's always good to go back and revisit it and hear it from another perspective too. Have a good rest of your Friday, guys, and have a great weekend. We'll talk to you soon.